Well, we think it's okay. It's obviously very early days. I think we'll learn a lot of winter testing, but everyone concerned's done a huge effort to get the car ready on time, and we test in Jerez next week. Yeah, it's the 2000 regulations are very different to what we've been used to. The car is almost 100% new, and there's new technologies as well. So it's a very difficult project to try and complete, in the right way. You've got no reference points from previous years and so on. But a lot of hard work's gone into it, and I get the feeling there'll be a huge amount of change during the season as we learn the regulations and learn how the car's performing. Yeah, there's no carryover, and I think, to a certain extent that makes it a bit tougher for a smaller team because you're designing cars in parallel, and you have to juggle your resource a little bit, and you certainly don't want to throw away the last year of your V8 performance, but you equally don't want to compromise your first year of the new regulations. So it's been a very big job, but an exciting challenge as well. New technology is always good to get into. I think it's tricky because you're not. The benefit that you have with doing an engine in-house is that you can, to a certain extent, develop your chassis and the engine at the same time. So you've got some compatibility there. When you're a customer, there's less of an opportunity to do that. So you get a little bit more of what you're given, and you have discussions where you can, but it's not quite so straightforward. Having said that, Renault have been excellent partners. We've been in a slightly more complicated situation by changing our engine supplier at the same time as the regulations, so we've had to work with a lot of new people, and it's the same for our partners at Renault. But our communication's been good. They're very supportive, and I think although you don't get to tune to the chassis quite as Mercedes and Ferrari can do, Renault, I have to say, are extremely accommodating and have given us a lot of scope. Well, I think it makes enormous sense to have both of us on the same power unit, particularly with the complexities of 2014. And there's synergies that can be built up there where you can, and you can legally with aspects of the powertrain. So we are using Red Bull gearbox internals, for example, so we're not both developing separately, which would make no sense under these circumstances. Because the engine is the same, obviously the load cases through the gearbox are the same, so we have the same design. Similarly with the hydraulics as well. So I think there's definitely synergies that can come about because the power unit is the same, whereas before it was not really possible. Certainly it has. I think there's no reference point for this because it's such a different situation. But I think for sure, and I've got to say, Red Bull's support with the gearbox and all its workings has been excellent. We're doing a very good job with them, and we're very happy with their help. It's very much a two-way conversation we have with them. So it's a lot easier working with Red Bull than it would have been doing it ourselves. Very, very difficult. It's a real challenge. You've got a lot of there's a huge amount of weight going into the car with these new power units. The energy recovery system itself is significantly more powerful and therefore heavier. You've got more cooling circuits, so there's all sorts of complexities which increases weight. And although the weight limit has increased, it's not quite as proportionate as you'd like. So weight's been a big challenge. We're still working on it. Obviously, we plan to be on target at the first race, but it certainly would be one of the biggest challenges, I think. No, not at the moment. I think it's very much work in progress. The first thing that we need to do, really, with both our drivers, both Jean-Eric has obviously been with us 2 years now, and Daniel, new to us, is to run the car first and see where we are. So the seat fitting side has been done. We've done a lot of work with them in the simulator. But I think we know so little about how these cars are really going to behave on the track. With the downforce levels you have, the tyre differences we're going to have, power units, of course. I think it's going to be a work in progress. And if there was a year to change a driver, in a way, this is a good one, because you don't really have a continuity from last year with the way the car is. It's also good for him because he's got no preconceptions about an F1 car. He'll step in and this is what it does and what it is. So in a way, it's a good time. It's a bit of a worry, of course, because it's such a new thing, and I think Renault have been working extremely hard on their efficiency, obviously, and ensuring that they can maximise our performance within the 100 kilogram limit. I think in terms of controlling it in the race, that's clear, and of course you have to do that. So that's less of a worry. It's more about extracting the performance for that level of fuel consumption. And using it strategically as well. There's going to be a new element to race strategy with how you use your fuel through the race. And this is something we'll have to learn. It's different, yeah. I mean, I think, there's been challenges, both aerodynamic and for the impact test as well. The most important bit with the noses is that it's safe. And the directive, if you like, from the regulation change is to have a lower nose with a certain cross section, and that leads to these rather stranger geometries. So I think you need to take that with safety in mind first, ensure the impact test and so on is done correctly, but obviously make it as quick as possible too, and that leads to these slightly strange shapes. And I suspect we're going to see a lot of different solutions. And unlike previous seasons, we're probably going to see changes through the season as well. So we'll be doing impact tests, I'm sure, as the season progresses with new nose designs. But it's the most obvious feature of the car that looks different. There's been a number of challenges with that because it's far more powerful than KERS was. KERS was a good device and a good place to start energy recovery, and relatively safe, if you like. It's conservative. It was worth maybe 0.3 a second per lap. You could use it to a certain extent for overtaking, but that's about all it did. These next steps, the ERS step that we have now is massively more complicated. It's worth a huge amount of lap time in comparison. It will make qualifying and race performance much more different because your state of charge and fuel consumption in qualifying will be optimised for lap time, whilst in the race you need to optimise it for running. And as a result of that, the installation of the system is far more of a challenge. So we have a larger unit. We have 2 motor generators rather than one of which is working off the turbo, one of which is working kinetically off the braking. And they can both interact now with the engine, the power unit, the ICE engine, let's say, within the power unit. In a far more complex and flexible way than KERS could. So it's all automated. The driver doesn't have to do much. It's just optimizing your output, if you like, for a given set of conditions on the track. So it's a huge challenge, and things like the cooling requirements for it are much bigger than we were used to with KERS. So it really is quite a new development. I think there's a good chance. I think the problem now with ERS is if it does pack up and you can still run just on the engine, you're going to be nowhere in your performance. So I think there's a good chance you'll see retirements due to that. But there are many other things as well. The engine itself is new. We have turbos now. We have much more thermal management around the car to look after and get right. So the chances of high retirements, I think, are big, and I'm sure we'll see many red flags in testing. I think idling is definitely one of them. One of the concerns you've got is a long spell on the grid, for example, at the start of a race where you've got no cooling air going through any of the systems. The charge coolers aren't cooling. There's all sorts of issues related to that which can generate temperature which you wouldn't normally see when you're running. So it's more critical than we've been used to, and we have to look at that. I think it's the same with the exhaust system now as well. The exhaust is feeding the turbo. That whole area is incredibly hot. The turbos are much closer to bits of the car than we've been used to with just the exhaust systems before. So all of that needs managing, and all of it is prone to causing you a problem at some point, particularly if the car is stopped. So there's a lot of testing to do and a lot of in-house work to do to ensure that you're safe come Melbourne. And obviously in very hot conditions as well, we won't know exactly where we stand. So it's another big challenge. But but one I think equally that you have to be pragmatic about, so it's something you have to put a lot of effort into to begin with. It could be the case, yeah, particularly in more critical conditions. You can't afford certainly to have high temperatures, both for reliability and performance going into the car. So there could be a bit of sitting back perhaps to get some fresh air if it's needed. You also have to think about how that plays into your strategy and your usage of fuel and engine modes as well, and how that may impact on it. So all of those things come into play much more so in a race scenario than was the case before. And I'm sure in some way there'll be an optimum solution which pans out, but we won't know it by Melbourne. I think it is, but equally you've got the compromise of trying to balance your resources, as I mentioned. So I think definitely there's opportunities. I think at the start of the season to be reliable and not be one of those who's prone to dropping out, although of course it's difficult to tell. I think there is an opportunity, and what's going to be interesting I think with this is because you've got both the power unit and the aerodynamic regulation changes both at once, similar to 2009 in a way when the regulations changed then. I suspect the development rates are going to be extremely high and very competitive, so how we start the season may be quite different to how you end it. But there's definitely opportunities there, yeah. And we need to do everything we can to make most of it, but all our competitors are thinking the same. I think it will still be a very big player, personally. Clearly, you've got a lot more dependency on the power unit performance, and again, that will shake out as time goes by, I think. But the aero will still be for me, a big player, and clearly the better aero performance you have, the quicker you'll go, and it's one of the few things as a manufacturer of a chassis that you can really influence on a day-to-day basis. So it's probably slightly less influential compared to before, but it's still going to be a player. Yeah, we've taken on a number of people. We're actively and aggressively building the team up. We know where we want to get to. We know it takes time. We've signed several new additions. We have Brendan Gilholm has joined us as the head of aero last year from Mercedes. He's doing a fantastic job in getting the aero department sorted out. We've had some signings in the race engineering area as well. Our Jean-Eric's race engineer, Phil Charles, has been promoted to the position of chief engineer. And we've signed Xavi Pujola, who came from from Williams, to work with Jean-Eric. We've had various other areas filled as well within the team in smaller positions, so and several in aero as well. So I think we're in a position now where we're attracting some good experienced people from other teams into STL, which is very encouraging for us. And we're planning to do more of that as we go. I wish I knew. I think it's going to be very interesting. We're going to see diverse solutions between different teams and different cars. The racing is very difficult to tell. I think strategically, it will change as the season goes on, but I think there'll be many more things to consider in the race. It might be more complicated to watch a race in a way, and I think with the uncertainty on the regulations and how well everyone's adapted to them, we're probably going to see this aggressive development and maybe a shift around on the grid as a result as the season goes by. So I think it's going to be exciting, and we may see a bit of a change of order on the grid to what we used to. So I think it's going to be a great year, and one that will be under constant change, I'm sure.